The arrival shuttle's doors opened with a soft pneumatic hiss, releasing a carefully controlled atmosphere into the docking bay of Nexus Prime's Galactic Academy. Zara Cathani stepped onto the platform with the nervous grace characteristic of her species, her moss-green skin catching the station's artificial lighting in ways that made her appear to shimmer like a living plant. She clutched her enrollment documentation with fingers that were slightly too long and delicate for human proportions, while her large amber eyes surveyed the bustling academy entrance where students from dozens of species moved through the orientation process. The Florean exchange program had been controversial even among her own people, sending their youth to study among aliens whose biological processes and social customs remained largely mysterious. "Welcome to Nexus Prime," announced the station's artificial intelligence in 17 different languages simultaneously. "New students, please proceed to Orientation Bay 7 for species-specific accommodation assignments." Zara followed the flow of new arrivals, her bare feet silent against the metallic flooring that had been textured to accommodate various alien locomotion methods. Her people didn't wear shoes, their feet contained sensitive root-like filaments that helped them process environmental information through direct contact with growing surfaces. The orientation bay buzzed with nervous energy as young beings from across the galaxy gathered for their first experience at the prestigious academy. Crystalline Altarians clustered together, their translucent bodies refracting light in beautiful patterns. A group of tentacled Cephalonians communicated through color changes in their skin. Feathered Xylorians perched on specially designed seating that accommodated their wings. Zara found herself naturally gravitating toward the edges of the large space, where the air circulation systems created subtle currents that helped her process atmospheric information. Her people's biology required constant chemical communication with their environment. Breathing wasn't just about oxygen exchange, but about sampling and responding to the complex molecular signatures that surrounded them. "Attention students," called Orientation Coordinator Vex qualified, a multi-armed being whose species Zara didn't recognize. "Environmental accommodation requests should be submitted immediately. We want everyone to feel comfortable during their academic journey." Zara approached the accommodation station with the careful politeness that her people considered essential for interspecies interaction. "Excuse me, I'm Zara Cathani from the Florean delegation. I need to discuss atmospheric requirements." The coordinator's expression shifted to one of professional concern. "Ah yes, Florean biological processes. We've prepared specialized atmospheric processors for your dormitory quarters. The chemical dampening system should minimize any environmental impact from your natural processes." Zara felt her chlorophyll-rich skin flush darker with embarrassment. Her people's biology included natural pheromone production, complex chemical communications that were essential for their health and social functioning. To most other species, these chemical signals registered as distinctive and often overwhelming scents. "The dampening systems," Zara said carefully, "they won't interfere with my biological functions. They're designed to neutralize chemical emissions while maintaining atmospheric safety for all students," the coordinator replied with the tone of someone who had explained this many times before. "We found that sensory accommodation works best when we minimize biological differences rather than try to adapt to them." Zara nodded, though her people's understanding of health and wellness suggested that suppressing natural biological processes was potentially harmful. She'd been warned that integration into galactic academic society required certain compromises. The student housing assignments were announced through the Academy's communication system, and Zara discovered she'd been placed in a specialized wing designed for biologically distinctive species. The designation felt both protective and isolating, a place where students whose natural processes created challenges for others could be contained. Her dormitory room was efficient and comfortable, with atmospheric processors humming quietly in the walls and a small growing chamber where she could tend the symbiotic plants that were essential for Florean psychological health. The space felt safe but also lonely, designed to minimize her impact on others rather than facilitate genuine interaction. Zara's first classes confirmed her fears about academic isolation. In advanced xenobotany, she sat alone at a lab table designed for 4 students. Her brilliant insights about plant communication and biological symbiosis impressed the professor, but her classmates maintained careful distance. The chemical signatures are quite distinctive, she overheard a Vulcarian student whisper to his partner. I can barely concentrate with that fragrance filling the air. Someone should talk to the administration, replied an Etherian with obvious discomfort. It's not fair to make everyone else adapt to one student's biological issues. Zara tried to focus on her studies, but the constant awareness of others' discomfort created a persistent stress that made her natural scent production stronger and more noticeable. The atmospheric dampeners in her dormitory helped, but she couldn't wear portable suppressors during the day without risking serious health consequences. Professor Elizabeth Hawkins approached Zara after the third xenobotany lecture. Miss Cathani, your understanding of plant biology is exceptional. Your insights about symbiotic relationships are graduate-level work. Thank you, Professor, Zara replied, though she couldn't help but notice how the professor maintained a respectful distance during the conversation. I'm concerned about your social integration, however. Learning is always easier when students can collaborate effectively. Zara looked around the classroom where other students worked in groups while she completed assignments alone. I understand that my biology creates challenges for others. I'm trying to minimize the impact. Perhaps, Professor Hawkins suggested gently, we need to find you study partners who are more compatible with your natural characteristics. The suggestion was kindly meant, but it reinforced Zara's growing sense that successful integration required her to change herself to accommodate others' comfort rather than expecting mutual adaptation. That evening, Zara sat in her dormitory room reviewing application materials for transfer to a Florean-only agricultural institute. The specialized school would provide excellent botanical education without the social challenges she faced at the diverse academy. She composed a message to her family, the academic opportunities here are remarkable, but the social dynamics are more difficult than we anticipated. I'm considering alternative arrangements that might be more suitable for everyone involved. Before sending the message, Zara looked out her window at the academy's common areas where students from dozens of species socialized together with apparent ease. Somewhere in that diverse community, she hoped, there might be someone who could see past biological differences to the person beneath. But after 3 weeks of isolation, such hope felt increasingly naive. Thomas Carter stepped off the transport shuttle with a duffel bag that smelled faintly of earth and growing things, despite having been sealed for the 3-day journey from Earth's agricultural sector. His acceptance to the Galactic Academy's interspecies botanical program represented the culmination of years of study and the first opportunity for a human from his agricultural background to study xenobotany at the galaxy's most prestigious institution. Unlike most humans who grew up in sterile urban environments or climate-controlled space habitats, Thomas had spent his childhood on his grandmother's farm in what used to be called Nebraska. The old woman had maintained traditional earth gardens long after most agriculture had moved to hydroponic facilities, insisting that understanding plants required getting your hands dirty and learning to read the subtle chemical communications that occurred in natural soil ecosystems. Remember, Tommy, his grandmother had told him before he left for the academy, plants talk to each other all the time. Most folks just forgot how to listen. You keep that nose of yours sharp, it'll tell you things that all the fancy sensors can't. The academy's orientation process was efficiently overwhelming, with students from species Thomas had only read about in xenobiology textbooks. His human sensory capabilities, he'd been warned, were considered relatively primitive compared to many galactic species, but his agricultural background had trained him to detect subtle chemical signatures that most humans couldn't perceive. Thomas Carter, agricultural exchange student from Earth Sector 7, he announced to the accommodation coordinator, a being with too many arms and what appeared to be compound eyes. Ah yes, the human agricultural specialist. We've prepared standard atmospheric conditions for your dormitory assignment. Any special environmental requirements? Actually, Thomas said, thinking of his grandmother's advice about understanding plant communication, I'd prefer to be housed where I can experience diverse atmospheric conditions. I'm here to learn about different species' approaches to botanical science. The coordinator's compound eyes focused on him with what might have been surprise. Most students prefer sensory isolation to minimize adjustment stress. You're requesting exposure to biological diversity? I think I'll learn more if I'm not insulated from the differences. Thomas was assigned to the main dormitory complex rather than the specialized housing reserved for humans and similar species. His first day of classes confirmed that the Academy's integration challenges were more complex than he'd anticipated. In advanced xenobotany, Thomas surveyed the classroom and noticed the social dynamics immediately. Students clustered by species, with clear patterns of avoidance around certain individuals. One student sat completely alone at a four-person lab table, a being with moss-green skin and an overall appearance that reminded Thomas of the walking plants from old Earth fairy tales. Professor Hawkins was explaining symbiotic relationships between plants and different atmospheric conditions when Thomas caught a distinctive scent drifting across the classroom. His first breath triggered a powerful wave of memory: summer mornings in his grandmother's garden, the rich smell of earth after rain, jasmine blooming near the old greenhouse, and the complex fragrance of herbs that had been crushed underfoot. "Mr. Carter," Professor Hawkins said, noticing his distraction, "perhaps you'd like to take the empty seat next to Miss Cathani? Your agricultural background might complement her botanical expertise." Thomas gathered his materials and moved to the lab table where the green-skinned student sat alone. As he approached, the scent that had triggered his memories grew stronger. Not overwhelming, but complex and layered like a carefully tended garden where dozens of different plants created a symphony of chemical communication. "I'm Thomas," he said, settling into the seat beside her. "Thomas Carter, from Earth's agricultural sector." The student, Zara, according to the professor's introduction, looked at him with obvious surprise and what might have been suspicion. "I'm Zara Cathani. You don't mind sitting here?" Thomas inhaled again, sorting through the chemical complexity of her natural fragrance. "Mind? Your scent reminds me of my grandmother's garden. It's like jasmine and fresh earth and something that might be night-blooming serious." Zara's amber eyes widened. "You find my chemical emissions pleasant?" "I find them familiar. Comforting, actually." Thomas pulled out his note-taking materials. "My grandmother always said that plants communicate through scent, and that humans who work with growing things develop better chemical sensitivity. Maybe that's why your natural fragrance doesn't bother me. Other students find it overwhelming," Zara said quietly. "I've been trying to suppress it, but that makes me sick." "Why would you suppress something natural? On Earth, we learned that chemical communication between plants is essential for healthy ecosystems. Blocking those signals usually damages the whole system." As Professor Hawkins began the lab exercise on plant symbiosis, Thomas found himself genuinely enjoying Zara's insights into botanical communication. Her understanding of how plants exchanged chemical information was intuitive in ways that exceeded anything he'd learned in human agricultural programs. "Your people actually communicate with plants?" Thomas asked as they worked together to analyze symbiotic relationships in various soil samples. "We don't communicate with them exactly," Zara explained, her confidence growing as she discussed her expertise. "But we process their chemical signals naturally. It's like being able to understand their emotional states and health conditions through their molecular emissions." "That's incredible. Humans have to use instruments to detect most of those chemical signatures. And Florians have to use instruments to understand technological systems that humans find intuitive. Different species, different strengths." Thomas noticed that other students were glancing toward their lab table with expressions ranging from curiosity to disgust. A pair of Vulcarian students had moved their experiment to the far side of the classroom, apparently to escape Zara's natural scent. "Zara," Thomas said quietly, "how long have you been dealing with this social isolation?" "Since I arrived 3 weeks ago. I'm actually considering transferring to a Florean-only agricultural institute. That would be a huge loss for the Academy. Your insights about plant communication are revolutionary." Zara's moss-green skin flushed darker. "It's hard to focus on academic achievement when you're constantly aware that your presence makes others uncomfortable." Thomas thought about his grandmother's gardens, where different plants supported each other through chemical communication and mutual assistance. Maybe the problem isn't your natural biology. Maybe the problem is that other people haven't learned to appreciate the value of biological diversity. As the lab session concluded, Thomas realized that his positive response to Zara's scent was creating ripples of confusion among other students. Several classmates approached him afterward. "Carter, are you sure you want to work with the Florean?" asked a human student named David Walsh. "The smell is pretty overwhelming." "I grew up on a farm," Thomas replied simply. "Different scents don't bother me. Besides, she's brilliant at botanical analysis." "But you could work with anyone. Why choose to sit next to someone who makes the whole classroom smell like a greenhouse?" Thomas smiled, thinking of summer mornings when his grandmother would send him to collect herbs for breakfast while the garden was still heavy with dew and complex fragrances. Because sometimes the best partnerships come from unexpected places. Over the following weeks, Thomas and Zara's partnership in xenobotany class evolved into a genuine friendship that surprised both of them. Thomas discovered that Zara's insights into plant communication went far beyond anything taught in human agricultural programs, while Zara found that Thomas's practical farming experience provided context for her theoretical knowledge that she'd never considered. The symbiotic relationships between root systems and atmospheric chemistry, Zara explained during one of their study sessions in the Academy's Botanical Conservatory, create communication networks that span entire ecosystems. "My people can sense these networks directly through our chemical processing." Thomas leaned closer to examine the plant specimens she was describing, breathing in the complex fragrance that surrounded her. "My grandmother always said plants were talking to each other. She could tell when something was wrong in the garden just by the way it smelled. I thought it was just experience, but maybe humans have more chemical sensitivity than we realize." "Your sensory capabilities are quite sophisticated for your species," Zara observed with the clinical interest of someone trained in biological diversity. "Most humans seem unable to detect the chemical signatures that you process naturally. Growing up in traditional agriculture probably helped. When you spend your childhood learning to read plant health through scent and subtle environmental changes, you develop different perceptual abilities." Their friendship was attracting attention throughout the academy, though not all of it was positive. Thomas overheard conversations in the human dormitory that ranged from puzzled concern to outright mockery. "Carter's spending all his time with that smelly plant girl," David Walsh complained to a group of human students. "I don't understand how he can stand to be around her." "Maybe his nose doesn't work properly," suggested another student with the casual cruelty that often passed for humor among young humans. "Or maybe he just has weird preferences for alien girls." Thomas ignored the comments, but he was aware that Zara faced even harsher social isolation from her own species. A message from her family, which she shared with him during a particularly difficult day, expressed growing concern about her choice to remain at the academy. "Zara, my dear, your Aunt Theshan reports that the Florean Agricultural Institute has excellent botanical programs without the social complications you're experiencing. Perhaps it's time to consider whether integration with alien species is worth the personal cost." "They're worried about me," Zara explained as they worked together on a research project about chemical communication in interspecies plant cultivation. Florean tradition emphasizes harmony and comfort. Staying in a situation that causes social stress seems irrational to my people. But you're learning things here that you couldn't learn anywhere else, Thomas pointed out. Your research on atmospheric chemical exchanges is groundbreaking. Knowledge isn't worth much if you're too isolated to share it effectively. Thomas thought about his grandmother's approach to gardening, how she'd always insisted that the most interesting discoveries came from experimenting with unexpected plant combinations. Zara, what if the social isolation isn't permanent? What if it's just the initial adjustment period before people learn to appreciate what you bring to the community? You're the only person who's made that adjustment so far. Then maybe I need to help others understand what they're missing. Thomas began a quiet campaign to change perceptions about Zara's presence in their shared classes. When working on group projects, he insisted that their team include Zara's expertise in botanical communication. When other students complained about her scent, he pointed out specific contributions she'd made to their academic success. Look at these results, Thomas told their xenobotany study group, displaying data from a project where Zara's chemical analysis had identified plant stress indicators that instruments had missed. Her biological capabilities detected problems that our technology couldn't measure. But does that justify making everyone else uncomfortable? Asked Marina Santos, a human student who had been particularly vocal about Zara's presence. Uncomfortable because she's different, or uncomfortable because you haven't learned to appreciate the difference? Thomas replied. My grandmother always said that unfamiliar scents become pleasant once you associate them with positive experiences. Gradually, a small group of students began to recognize the value of Zara's unique perspectives. A mechanoid engineer named Vex, 42, discovered that Zara's chemical sensitivity could detect atmospheric changes that predicted equipment failures. An aquatic student called Ripple found that Zara's insights into biological communication helped optimize underwater plant cultivation. Thomas, Zara said one evening as they reviewed their latest research results, I've never had friends from other species before. Florean culture doesn't really prepare us for cross-species social relationships. My grandmother used to say that the best gardens have the most diversity, Thomas replied. Plants that seem incompatible often end up supporting each other in unexpected ways. Are you comparing me to a plant? I'm comparing both of us to a garden ecosystem where different elements contribute to the overall health and productivity. Zara's moss-green skin shifted to a warmer shade that Thomas had learned indicated amusement. That's actually a beautiful metaphor. Though I should mention that your human scent also carries distinctive chemical signatures. You smell like earth and growing things, very comforting to someone whose biology is designed to process plant-related chemical information. I smell like my grandmother's garden. You smell like someone who understands growing things. It's probably why I felt comfortable with you immediately. Their conversation was interrupted by Professor Hawkins, who approached their study area with obvious excitement. Miss Cathani, Mr. Carter, I've been reviewing your collaborative research on chemical communication in interspecies agriculture. The results are quite remarkable. Thank you, Professor, Zara replied, though Thomas noticed she still maintained a careful politeness that indicated ongoing social anxiety. I'd like to propose that you expand this research into a formal project for the Academy's annual Science Symposium. The combination of Florean biological capabilities and human agricultural experience is producing insights that could revolutionize how we approach botanical science in multi-species environments. Thomas looked at Zara, who was clearly excited by the academic opportunity but also apprehensive about increased public attention. Professor, would this research require Zara to work with larger groups of students? Ideally, yes. The implications of your work extend across multiple disciplines and species specializations. Then we'll need to address the social integration challenges first, Thomas said firmly. Zara's academic contributions can't reach their full potential if she's working in an environment where her natural biology is treated as a problem rather than an asset. Professor Hawkins nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Carter, that's an excellent point. Perhaps it's time for the Academy to reconsider how we approach biological diversity among our student body. The transformation began slowly, with individual students recognizing the practical advantages of Zara's unique biological capabilities. Thomas served as an informal ambassador, helping translate between Zara's Florean perspectives and the sensory comfort zones of other species. The key, Thomas explained to their expanding study group, is understanding that Zara's scent carries information. Instead of just smelling something different, try to notice what the chemical signatures are telling you about environmental conditions. Vex, 42, the mechanoid engineer, was the first to make the conceptual breakthrough. Processing chemical data as environmental information rather than subjective sensory experience. Zara's biological emissions function as atmospheric diagnostic systems. Exactly, Thomas replied. When you think of her scent as useful data instead of just unfamiliar sensation, the whole experience changes. Ripple, the aquatic student, had been struggling with plant cultivation in underwater environments where traditional human techniques failed completely. Zara, your chemical sensitivity could help me understand why my botanical experiments keep failing in aquatic conditions. Underwater plants communicate through dissolved chemical compounds that I can detect even in atmospheric samples, Zara explained, her confidence growing as students began seeking her expertise. Your cultivation problems are probably related to chemical imbalances that interfere with plant communication networks. Within weeks, their informal study group had expanded to include students from 8 different species, all working on collaborative projects that combined their diverse biological capabilities. Thomas found himself serving as coordinator and translator, helping different species understand each other's sensory perspectives. This is unprecedented, Professor Hawkins observed during one of their group sessions. Multi-species collaboration at this level usually takes years to develop, but you've created functional integration in a matter of weeks. Thomas helped us understand that biological differences are assets rather than obstacles, explained Marina Santos, the human student who had initially complained about Zara's presence. When I stopped thinking of Zara's scent as unpleasant and started recognizing it as environmental information, everything changed. The practical benefits are remarkable, added a crystalline student named Prism, whose species typically avoided biological interactions. Zara's chemical analysis capabilities detect atmospheric changes that our mineral-based sensors miss entirely. Thomas and Zara's research project was producing results that exceeded their professor's expectations. By combining Florean biological processes with human agricultural techniques, they were developing crop cultivation methods that worked effectively across multiple planetary environments. The chemical communication networks that Zara can detect naturally, Thomas explained to the Academy's research committee, provide information about plant health, soil conditions, and atmospheric balance that traditional sensors often miss. Your methodology suggests that biological sensing capabilities could enhance rather than replace technological monitoring systems, observed Dr. Chen, the Academy's research director. The integration of different sensory approaches is producing more comprehensive environmental analysis. Zara presented their findings with growing confidence, her natural expertise in botanical communication enhanced by Thomas's practical experience and the diverse perspectives of their study group. Florean chemical sensitivity, combined with human agricultural knowledge and the technological capabilities of other species, creates agricultural systems that are more productive and sustainable than any single species approach. The Academy's annual Science Symposium provided the first public showcase for their collaborative research. Thomas watched with pride as Zara addressed an audience of professors and students from dozens of species, her initial social anxiety replaced by genuine enthusiasm for sharing their discoveries. The key insight, Zara explained to the assembled audience, is that chemical communication between plants follows patterns that can be enhanced through technological intervention, but only when the natural biological processes are understood and respected rather than suppressed. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with researchers from multiple disciplines requesting collaboration on related projects. Students who had initially avoided Zara now sought her expertise for their own research initiatives. Ms. Cathani approached Dr. Vorthak, a respected Vulcarian biochemist who had previously been among the more vocal critics of her presence. "I owe you an apology. My initial discomfort with your chemical emissions prevented me from recognizing the sophisticated biological capabilities they represent." Dr. Vorthak, "No apology is necessary," Zara replied graciously. "Understanding between species requires time and experience. I'm grateful that you were willing to reconsider your initial impressions." Thomas observed the interaction with satisfaction, remembering his grandmother's advice about patience and persistence in cultivating any kind of garden. "Zara, you've become one of the most sought-after research partners at the Academy. Because you helped me understand that my biology was an asset rather than a problem," Zara replied. "Without your friendship and advocacy, I would have transferred to the Florean Agricultural Institute months ago. And the galaxy would have lost the opportunity for these breakthrough discoveries in interspecies agriculture." Their success was attracting attention beyond the Academy. The Galactic Agricultural Council requested a formal presentation of their research, recognizing its potential applications for food production on worlds throughout the galaxy. "Thomas," Zara said as they prepared for the council presentation, "I want you to know that your acceptance changed more than just my academic experience. It changed how I understand myself and my place in the galactic community. Your research changed how I understand the importance of biological diversity and the value of different sensory perspectives," Thomas replied. "This partnership has been educational for both of us. Professor Hawkins approached them with news that would reshape their academic futures. Miss Cathani, Mr. Carter, the Academy has approved the establishment of an interspecies agricultural research program based on your collaborative work. You're being offered positions as founding research coordinators. Thomas and Zara exchanged glances, realizing that their friendship had evolved into something larger, a demonstration that acceptance of biological differences could lead to revolutionary advances in scientific understanding. Professor, Thomas said, we accept, on the condition that the program prioritizes biological diversity as a research asset rather than a challenge to be overcome. That condition, Professor Hawkins replied with a smile, is exactly why your leadership is essential for this program's success. The establishment of the Interspecies Agricultural Research Program marked a fundamental shift in how the Galactic Academy approached biological diversity among its student body. Thomas and Zara found themselves at the center of an institutional transformation that extended far beyond their original friendship. The program's success, Dean Morrison explained during the inaugural planning session, demonstrates that biological differences between species can be leveraged as research assets rather than merely tolerated as social challenges. Thomas reviewed the program applications with amazement. We have requests from students representing 34 different species, all wanting to participate in collaborative agricultural research. Including several species that were previously considered too biologically distinctive for standard integration programs, Zara added, her confidence now fully established after months of academic success and peer recognition. The program's first major project involved developing atmospheric cultivation techniques for planets with extreme environmental conditions. Zara's chemical sensitivity provided crucial insights into how plants adapted to different atmospheric compositions, while Thomas's agricultural background helped translate those insights into practical cultivation methods. The plant specimens from Thermal Prime are communicating stress signals that our instruments can't detect, Zara explained to their research team, which now included students from 12 different species. The chemical signatures indicate that they're struggling with atmospheric pressure variations, not temperature extremes as we initially assumed. Thomas coordinated the team's response to Zara's analysis. If atmospheric pressure is the limiting factor, we can modify our cultivation chambers to provide more stable pressure environments while maintaining the temperature ranges the plants require. The success of their atmospheric cultivation project attracted attention from planetary development organizations throughout the galaxy. Their techniques were being adapted for use on dozens of worlds where traditional human agricultural methods had failed. Dr. Cathani, Professor Hawkins addressed Zara during one of their program reviews, your research is revolutionizing how we approach agricultural challenges in diverse planetary environments. The success comes from combining different species' capabilities, Zara replied, her natural humility now balanced by justified confidence in her contributions. Thomas's coordination abilities, the mechanoid student's precision engineering, the aquatic student's understanding of fluid dynamics, every species brings essential perspectives. Thomas had developed a systematic approach to facilitating interspecies collaboration that was being studied as a model for similar programs throughout the galactic educational system. The key principle, he explained to visiting administrators, is treating biological differences as complementary capabilities rather than obstacles to overcome. Mr. Carter's integration techniques, noted Dr. Chen, have reduced species-based social isolation by 60% across the Academy's entire student population. The program's influence extended beyond agricultural research. Students from various species were forming collaborative partnerships in disciplines ranging from engineering to xenopsychology, all inspired by the success of Thomas and Zara's original friendship. Zara, Thomas said during one of their planning sessions, do you realize that your willingness to stay at the Academy despite the initial social challenges has transformed the entire institution's approach to species integration? I stayed because you demonstrated that acceptance was possible, Zara replied. Without your friendship, I would have transferred to the Florean Agricultural Institute and never discovered these collaborative possibilities. Their research program was producing breakthrough discoveries that exceeded all expectations. The combination of Florean biological capabilities, human agricultural knowledge, and the diverse technological skills of other species created agricultural systems that surpassed anything any single species had developed independently. The atmospheric cultivation techniques we've developed, Thomas reported to the Galactic Agricultural Council, are increasing food production efficiency by an average of 40% across diverse planetary environments. More significantly, Zara added, the integration of different species' biological and technological capabilities is creating agricultural systems that adapt automatically to changing environmental conditions. The Council's response led to funding for expanded research facilities and the establishment of similar programs at universities throughout the galaxy. Thomas and Zara's partnership had become a model for interspecies cooperation that was being replicated across multiple academic disciplines. Dr. Carter, Dr. Cathani, the Council President announced during their formal recognition ceremony, your research has demonstrated that biological diversity, when properly understood and integrated, represents one of the galaxy's most valuable resources for addressing complex challenges. The Academy's transformation was evident in every aspect of student life. Dormitory assignments now actively promoted species integration rather than separation. Dining facilities offered atmospheric zones designed to accommodate different species' sensory preferences simultaneously. Study groups routinely included students from multiple species working on collaborative projects. The social isolation that characterized my early months here has been completely eliminated, Zara observed as they toured the renovated academy facilities. Students now seek out partnerships with biologically different species because they understand the practical advantages. Your experience inspired an institutional recognition that diversity creates strength rather than division, Thomas replied. The Academy is becoming what it should have been all along, a place where different capabilities combine to create enhanced learning opportunities. Their original research partnership had evolved into a comprehensive program that was training the next generation of scientists in interspecies collaboration techniques. Students who graduated from their program were being recruited by research institutions, environmental organizations, and agricultural development programs throughout the galaxy. Thomas, Zara said as they reviewed applications for the program's third-year expansion, when I first arrived at this academy, I never imagined that my natural scent would become the foundation for revolutionary changes in interspecies education. And I never imagined that my grandmother's advice about appreciating different garden scents would lead to transforming how the galaxy approaches agricultural science, Thomas replied with a smile. Professor Hawkins approached them with news that would define the next phase of their collaboration. Dr. Carter, Dr. Cathani, the Galactic Agricultural Council wants to establish a permanent interspecies research institute based on your program's success. You're being offered positions as co-directors of the galaxy's first facility dedicated to collaborative agricultural research. Thomas and Zara looked at each other, realizing that their friendship, which had begun with Thomas's nostalgic response to her natural scent, had become the foundation for institutional changes that would benefit countless species throughout the galaxy. We accept, they said simultaneously, their partnership having evolved from personal acceptance to professional collaboration that was reshaping galactic scientific research. 3 years after the establishment of the Interspecies Agricultural Research Institute, Thomas and Zara stood in the central coordination hub of a facility that had become the galaxy's leading center for collaborative scientific research. The building itself embodied their integration philosophy, atmospheric zones that accommodated dozens of different species simultaneously, with environmental systems that celebrated rather than suppressed biological diversity. The quarterly reports are remarkable, Thomas said, reviewing data from their research teams scattered across 46 star systems. We have active agricultural projects involving over 100 species combinations, each producing unique solutions to environmental challenges. Zara monitored the biological systems that connected her directly to research installations throughout the galaxy, her natural chemical sensitivity enhanced by technological amplification to provide real-time environmental analysis across multiple worlds. The atmospheric cultivation project on Kepler Prime is showing extraordinary results. The combination of gaseous form consciousness with solid matter plant biology is creating atmospheric restoration faster than any previous terraforming technique. And the underwater agriculture program on Aquarius 7? Thomas asked, coordinating between different research teams with the systematic approach he developed for managing complex collaborative projects. The Aquatic Coalition's fluid dynamics expertise, combined with Florean plant communication and crystalline precision growing, has increased underwater food production by 200%, Zara replied, her confidence now completely established after years of revolutionary discoveries. Their institute had become a destination for researchers from across the galaxy, all seeking to learn the integration techniques that made their unprecedented success possible. Thomas's coordination methods and Zara's biological capabilities had created a collaborative framework that was being adapted for research challenges far beyond agriculture. Dr. Carter, Dr. Cathani, announced their research coordinator, a being whose species Thomas still couldn't identify despite 3 years of working together. The Galactic Science Council requests a presentation on your integration methodologies. They want to apply your techniques to medical research, environmental restoration, and technological development. The principles are the same regardless of the research field, Thomas explained to the council representatives during their presentation. Biological and technological differences between species represent complementary capabilities that create enhanced problem-solving when properly integrated. Dr. Cathani's chemical sensitivity, he continued, provides environmental analysis that enhances rather than replaces traditional technological monitoring. The combination produces more comprehensive understanding than either approach achieves independently. Zara demonstrated her enhanced capabilities to the impressed council members. The technological amplification systems developed by our research teams allow me to monitor atmospheric conditions, plant health, and environmental changes across multiple star systems simultaneously. Your biological processes have been enhanced by technology, asked Dr. Vorthak, the Vulcarian biochemist who had become one of their strongest supporters after initially opposing Zara's presence at the Academy. The technology amplifies and extends my natural capabilities rather than replacing them, Zara explained. Human coordination techniques help me manage the expanded sensory input, while various species' technological expertise provides the monitoring and communication systems that make galaxy-wide environmental analysis possible. The Council's decision to fund expansion of their institute to include medical and environmental research represented recognition that their collaboration model had applications beyond agricultural science. Thomas and Zara found themselves coordinating research teams that included medical specialists, environmental engineers, and technological developers from hundreds of different species. The integration challenges are more complex with medical research, Thomas observed as they planned the expanded facility. Species have even more diverse biological requirements when we're dealing with health and medical treatment. But the principles remain the same, Zara replied. Different biological capabilities combine to create enhanced understanding and more effective solutions. Their medical research teams were producing breakthrough discoveries that revolutionized interspecies healthcare. Florean chemical sensitivity could detect disease markers that traditional medical instruments missed. Human coordination techniques help translate between different species' medical approaches. Technological specialists from various civilizations contributed monitoring and treatment capabilities that enhanced biological healing processes. Dr. Cathani, reported Dr. Maria Santos, who had transferred from the academy to join their medical research program, your chemical analysis detected the early stages of atmospheric poisoning on mining station 6 3 days before our instruments registered any problems. The plants in the station's life support systems were communicating chemical distress signals, Zara explained. The atmospheric contamination hadn't reached levels that affected most species, but it was already damaging the biological systems that maintain environmental balance. Early detection allowed us to prevent a crisis that could have affected thousands of beings, Thomas added with satisfaction. This is exactly the kind of practical application that makes our research valuable beyond academic achievement. The Institute's success was attracting attention from diplomatic organizations interested in applying their integration techniques to interspecies political cooperation. Thomas and Zara found themselves consulting on diplomatic protocols that accommodated diverse species' biological and cultural requirements. The principles that work for scientific research also apply to diplomatic interaction, Thomas explained to representatives from the Galactic Diplomatic Corps. Understanding biological differences as assets rather than obstacles creates more effective communication between species. Zara's chemical sensitivity can detect emotional states and health conditions that help diplomats understand when representatives from different species are experiencing stress or discomfort, he continued. This information helps prevent misunderstandings that could escalate into diplomatic incidents. The transformation extended to educational institutions throughout the galaxy. Universities were establishing programs based on their integration model, training students in collaborative research techniques that emphasized biological diversity as a research asset. Professor, a visiting educator asked during one of their training seminars, how do you maintain research effectiveness when accommodating so many different species' biological requirements simultaneously? By understanding that accommodation creates enhancement rather than limitation, Zara replied. When we design research environments that support diverse biological processes, we create conditions where every species can contribute their maximum capabilities. The key insight, Thomas added, is that biological diversity increases research potential rather than complicating it. Different sensory capabilities, different analytical approaches, different technological specializations, they all combine to create comprehensive understanding that no single species could achieve alone. Their institute had become a symbol of successful interspecies cooperation that was inspiring similar collaborative efforts throughout the galactic community. The friendship that had begun with Thomas's nostalgic response to Zara's natural scent had evolved into institutional changes that were reshaping how civilizations approached collaborative problem-solving. Thomas, Zara said as they reviewed plans for the institute's expansion into environmental restoration research, do you ever think about how different things would be if you had chosen to sit somewhere else during that first xenobotany class? I think about my grandmother's garden, Thomas replied, and how she always said that the most beautiful and productive gardens come from combining plants that seem incompatible but actually support each other. Are you still comparing our partnership to garden cultivation? I'm saying that the best collaborations, like the best gardens, grow from understanding that diversity creates strength. 5 years after their first meeting in xenobotany class, Thomas and Zara stood before the Galactic Unity Council to receive the prestigious award for interspecies cooperation, the highest recognition given for contributions to galactic peace and understanding. Their research institute had become a model for collaborative science that was being replicated throughout the galaxy. The Interspecies Agricultural Research Institute, announced Council President Ethan, a being whose crystalline form reflected light in patterns that conveyed deep respect, has revolutionized how the galactic community approaches scientific research, environmental challenges, and species integration. Thomas looked out at the assembly representing over 300 different species, many of whom had participated in research programs based on the collaborative techniques he and Zara had developed. Your Excellency, this achievement represents the contributions of countless beings who chose cooperation over isolation. Dr. Cathani's biological capabilities, he continued, combined with the technological and intellectual contributions of species throughout the galaxy, have created research methodologies that exceed what any civilization could achieve independently. Zara stepped forward to address the assembly, her natural confidence now enhanced by years of successful collaboration and universal respect for her contributions. The transformation began with a simple recognition that biological differences represent assets rather than obstacles. Thomas Carter's acceptance of my natural scent, which other students found unpleasant, demonstrated that perspective and understanding can transform barriers into bridges, she explained to the attentive audience. The Institute's impact extended far beyond agricultural research. Their integration techniques were being applied to medical research, environmental restoration, technological development, and diplomatic cooperation throughout the galactic community. The medical applications alone, reported Dr. Santos during the achievement presentation, have improved healthcare outcomes for over 2 billion beings across 43 star systems. Environmental restoration projects using our collaborative techniques, added Dr. Wright, have successfully rehabilitated damaged ecosystems on 78 worlds. Thomas and Zara's original research on atmospheric cultivation had evolved into comprehensive environmental protection systems that were preserving planetary ecosystems throughout the galaxy. Their techniques for combining different species' biological and technological capabilities had become standard practice for addressing complex environmental challenges. The early detection systems based on Dr. Cathani's chemical sensitivity, explained Environmental Coordinator Vex, 42, have prevented 37 potential ecological disasters by identifying environmental stress before it reached crisis levels. More significantly, Thomas added, we've demonstrated that biological diversity creates enhanced problem-solving capabilities rather than complicating research challenges. The Institute had trained thousands of researchers in collaborative techniques that emphasized species differences as research assets. Universities throughout the galaxy had restructured their programs to promote interspecies cooperation, with remarkable improvements in both research outcomes and social integration. Our graduates, Zara reported with pride, are leading collaborative research initiatives on over 200 worlds, applying integration techniques to challenges ranging from terraforming to diplomatic mediation. The social transformation has been equally remarkable, Thomas observed. Species-based discrimination in educational institutions has decreased by 80% since our integration model became widely adopted. Their success story was being taught in schools throughout the galaxy as an example of how individual acceptance could lead to institutional transformation. The academy where they had met now served as a training center for educators learning to implement diversity-positive integration programs. Dr. Carter, Dr. Cathani, approached Dean Morrison, who had traveled from the academy to attend the ceremony. Your original friendship has become the foundation for educational reforms that are transforming how young beings learn to interact across species boundaries. Students now actively seek partnerships with biologically different species, the dean continued, because they understand that diversity creates enhanced learning opportunities. The recognition ceremony included presentations from species throughout the galaxy who had benefited from research projects based on Thomas and Zara's collaborative model. Representatives spoke of agricultural breakthroughs that had ended food shortages, medical discoveries that had eliminated diseases, and environmental restoration that had saved dying worlds. The Florean Agricultural Institute, announced Elder Theshan via quantum communication, formally recognizes Dr. Zara Cathani as the most distinguished graduate in our species' educational history. Her choice to remain at the Galactic Academy despite initial social challenges, the Elder continued, led to discoveries that have revolutionized botanical science throughout the galaxy. Thomas's home world of Earth had established an agricultural research program named in his honor, applying his coordination techniques to enhance food production throughout the human colonies. Thomas Carter, announced Earth's agricultural minister, has demonstrated that human capabilities for facilitating interspecies cooperation represent one of our species' most valuable contributions to galactic civilization. The techniques he developed for managing collaborative research are being applied to diplomatic, educational, and technological cooperation initiatives throughout human space. The ceremony concluded with the installation of Thomas and Zara as galactic ambassadors for interspecies cooperation, a position that would allow them to establish similar research institutes throughout the galaxy. Dr. Carter, Dr. Cathani, Council President Ethan announced, your appointment as galactic ambassadors recognizes your unique qualifications for promoting collaborative research and species integration on a galactic scale. Your success demonstrates that acceptance of biological differences, when combined with systematic cooperation techniques, can transform isolated species into collaborative civilizations. Thomas and Zara accepted their appointment with the understanding that their work was expanding from institutional research to galactic diplomacy and species integration. Our mission, Thomas explained to the assembly, is to help every civilization discover that their biological and technological differences represent opportunities for collaborative enhancement rather than barriers to overcome. The goal, Zara added, is a galactic community where species work together naturally because they understand that diversity creates strength. As the ceremony concluded, Thomas and Zara walked through the reception area where beings from hundreds of species socialized together with the natural ease that had become characteristic of events inspired by their integration model. Zara, Thomas said, watching a group of young beings from a dozen different species collaborate on a research presentation, your natural sense still reminds me of my grandmother's garden. And your acceptance still reminds me that friendship can transcend any biological difference, Zara replied with the warmth that had characterized their partnership from its beginning. Do you think we've achieved what we set out to accomplish? Thomas looked around at the unprecedented gathering of cooperative species, all working together because they had learned to appreciate rather than merely tolerate their differences. I think we've demonstrated that the most important discoveries often begin with the simplest acts of acceptance. 10 years after Thomas first sat down next to Zara in xenobotany class, their influence had transformed not just agricultural science, but the fundamental approach to interspecies cooperation throughout the galactic community. Standing in the coordination center of the Galactic Institute for Collaborative Research, they oversaw programs that spanned 3 galactic sectors and involved over 500 different species. The latest survey results are extraordinary, Thomas reported, reviewing data from their network of collaborative research facilities. Species-based discrimination in educational institutions has decreased by 93% in sectors where our integration programs have been implemented. Zara monitored the biological communication networks that now connected research installations across dozens of star systems, her enhanced capabilities allowing her to provide real-time environmental analysis for agricultural, medical, and terraforming projects throughout their operational area. The atmospheric restoration project in the Andromeda sector is ahead of schedule. The combination of gaseous consciousness atmospheric manipulation with solid matter botanical engineering is creating breathable environments faster than any previous terraforming technique. Their success had attracted attention from the highest levels of galactic governance. The Universal Council of Civilizations had formally adopted their integration principles as standard policy for all interspecies cooperation initiatives. Dr. Carter, Dr. Cathani, announced Universal Council President Zephyr 9 through their quantum communication system, your collaborative methodologies have become the foundation for diplomatic, educational, and research cooperation throughout the known galaxy. The transformation extends beyond scientific achievement, the President continued. Your work has demonstrated that biological and technological diversity represents the galaxy's greatest resource for addressing complex challenges. Thomas coordinated response teams that were applying their integration techniques to crisis situations throughout the galaxy. Environmental disasters, medical emergencies, technological failures, and diplomatic conflicts were all being resolved more effectively through collaborative approaches that leveraged different species' unique capabilities. The crisis response on Thermal Prime demonstrates perfect application of our principles, Thomas explained to their staff coordinators. Crystalline beings provided heat-resistant engineering, aquatic species supplied cooling systems, Florean biology detected atmospheric toxins, and human coordination integrated all the different approaches into effective disaster relief. Over 3 million beings were evacuated safely because different species worked together instead of competing for resources, Zara added with the satisfaction that came from seeing their principles save lives on a massive scale. Their original research institute had expanded into a galaxy-wide network of collaborative facilities that were training the next generation of scientists, diplomats, engineers, and medical professionals in integration techniques that emphasized diversity as strength. The education statistics are remarkable, reported Dr. Santos, now Director of Medical Cooperation Training. Students trained in our collaborative programs show 60% higher success rates in complex problem-solving compared to traditional single-species education. More importantly, added Dr. Wright from his position as Environmental Restoration Coordinator, they're creating solutions that exceed what any previous generation of scientists achieved working within species-specific limitations. The social transformation was equally significant. Young beings throughout the galaxy were growing up in environments where interspecies cooperation was normal rather than exceptional. Species-based prejudice was becoming increasingly rare as new generations learned to appreciate biological diversity as an asset. The academy where we first met, Zara observed during one of their planning sessions, now serves as a model for educational institutions throughout the galaxy. Students actively seek partnerships with biologically different species because they understand the practical advantages. And the dormitory where you were initially isolated for your natural scent now houses our most successful collaborative research teams, Thomas added with amusement. Your old room has been converted into a shrine for successful integration. Their influence extended to the highest levels of galactic diplomacy. The techniques they had developed for managing biological differences in research environments were being applied to diplomatic negotiations between species with fundamentally different physiological and cultural requirements. The temporal consciousness peace negotiations, reported diplomatic coordinator Ethros, one of the first dragons they had trained in their integration techniques, succeeded because we applied Dr. Cathani's biological sensitivity to detect emotional states across time-dilated consciousness, combined with Dr. Carter's coordination methods to manage communication between beings who experience time differently. That peace agreement, Thomas noted with pride, ended a conflict that had lasted subjective centuries because no previous diplomatic approach could accommodate the temporal differences between the species involved. The recognition ceremony for their lifetime achievement took place at the original academy, now renamed the Carter-Cathani Institute for Interspecies Cooperation. Representatives from over 600 species attended the celebration, many participating via quantum communication from research facilities throughout the galaxy. Thomas Carter and Zara Cathani, announced Academy Chancellor Hawkins, their former professor who had supported their collaboration from its beginning, received the Galactic Lifetime Achievement Award for contributions that have transformed civilization itself. Their friendship, which began with Thomas's acceptance of Zara's natural scent, has become the foundation for collaborative techniques that have revolutionized scientific research, environmental protection, medical treatment, and diplomatic cooperation throughout the known galaxy. Thomas addressed the assembly with the quiet confidence that had characterized their work from its beginning. Our success demonstrates that the most profound transformations often begin with the simplest recognition, that differences between beings represent opportunities rather than obstacles. My grandmother taught me that the most beautiful gardens combine plants that seem incompatible but actually support each other, he continued, looking at Zara with the affection that had sustained their partnership through years of revolutionary change. Zara taught me that the same principle applies to relationships between intelligent species. Zara stepped forward to address the audience that included beings whose species had been considered too biologically distinctive for integration just a decade earlier. Thomas's acceptance of my natural biology demonstrated that perspective and understanding can transform any barrier into a bridge. Today, young beings throughout the galaxy grow up understanding that biological diversity creates strength rather than division, she continued. They collaborate naturally because they have learned to appreciate rather than merely tolerate their differences. The celebration included presentations from research teams whose work had grown from Thomas and Zara's original agricultural collaboration. Medical breakthroughs that had eliminated diseases, environmental restoration that had saved dying worlds, technological developments that had revolutionized space travel, and diplomatic solutions that had ended ancient conflicts. All traced their origins to the integration techniques developed through their friendship. The agricultural research that began our collaboration, Zara reflected, has evolved into food production systems that feed billions of beings across multiple galactic sectors. More significantly, Thomas added, we've proven that acceptance of biological differences, when systematically applied, can transform isolated civilizations into collaborative communities that achieve what none could accomplish alone. As the ceremony concluded, Thomas and Zara walked through the Academy's Botanical Conservatory, where plants from hundreds of worlds grew together in harmony, a living symbol of the integration principles they had pioneered. Thomas, Zara said, breathing in the complex fragrances that surrounded them, when I first arrived at this academy, I never imagined that my natural scent would become the foundation for galactic transformation. And I never imagined that my grandmother's advice about appreciating garden diversity would lead to revolutionizing interspecies cooperation, Thomas replied, watching young beings from dozens of species study together with the natural ease that had become characteristic of their generation. Your scent still reminds me of her garden, he added with a smile. Summer mornings, jasmine after rain, and the sense that everything was exactly as it should be. And your acceptance still reminds me that true friendship transcends any biological difference, Zara replied, her amber eyes reflecting the satisfaction of a life spent proving that understanding could overcome any barrier. They stood together in the conservatory that had been dedicated to their memory, surrounded by the living proof that diversity creates beauty, watching young beings discover the same truth that had transformed their lives and reshaped galactic civilization. That the greatest achievements come from embracing rather than fearing the differences that make each being unique. The stars above the academy shone with the same light they always had, but now they illuminated a galaxy where species work together naturally, where biological differences were celebrated as assets, and where two friends' acceptance of each other had become the foundation for universal cooperation that spanned countless worlds and endless possibilities.